Round one of the 2024 NFL Draft is in the books. We'll take a little peek ahead at round 2 and 3 as well on today's episode, but some major swings by teams, a lot of mayhem in round one, including some head scratching and I think home run draft picks. We'll break down all of it right now on Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love our everydayers, and we love it when you are subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Here we go. It was a chalky draft to start, Matt, until we got to around pick 5, I think. And it's funny because all of the late mock drafts had J.C. Latham going to the Los Angeles Chargers at pick number 5, and they actually did go offensive tackle, but it wasn't the big 340-pounder. It was the tall 6'8" offensive tackle. It was Joe Alt who went to Jim Harbaugh's Los Angeles Chargers to set the tone for a new regime there in Los Angeles. And then that allowed the New York Giants to go Malik Neighbors after that. Brian Daboll saying he needed to add a lot of speed, which meant Joe Alt in all the chalk mocks, who was not there for the Tennessee Titans, but they did take offensive tackle, and they went with the 340-pounder in J.C. Latham. I think that was the beginning of the interesting draft picks on Thursday night. And then
pick 8 hit.
one even more interesting pick hit following that at pick number 8, which was Michael Penix Jr., quarterback out of Washington, to the Atlanta Falcons, who just signed Kirk Cousins in free agency. And we were off and running on a really interesting evening at that point.
So unbelievable to me that 6 quarterbacks go in the top 12. Every other pick for a dozen picks was a QB. And I don't mean to rain on parades, but I doubt 4 of them hit. 2 of them might hit. You know, I mean, history shows. So, yes. And as a result, there's obviously a ripple effect to such things. And I definitely want to talk Penix a lot. But a lot of these playoff teams, you know, the Ravens, I mean, like these good teams end up getting the best edges and corners in the draft that didn't need quarterbacks anyway. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, thanks. Take all the quarterbacks. We'll take the edge guys in the corners. You know what I mean?
It made so there was more winners later in the draft than I thought there was going to be, getting players that they probably didn't think they were going to get. And when it comes to, say, the Raiders at 13, did they expect to draft Brock Bowers? Probably not. They maybe thought they were just going to sit back and take Penix. And then they're like, well, wait a second, what? And then Bo Nix went, what? Okay. Yeah. I guess we're not drafting quarterback because 6 are already gone. And then they went ahead and
let's stop there real quick. To me, that was the most glaring, truly best athlete available pick, the Raiders. Because I mean, they could have went right tackle. They could have went defense. I bet because they didn't go right tackle or defense, they were planning on quarterback, and then they're all gone. But as a result, our 5th best player on the board is still there. We'll take him, even though we don't need him and have no one to throw to him, you know?
Right. And then with the Denver Broncos right in front of them, I wonder if the Broncos had entertained the idea of not taking Bo Nix there. But once 5 quarterbacks were gone, they're like, well, we can't even trade down because the Raiders are right behind us and might take a quarterback.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, it just started to put pressure on the quarterback-needy teams, and they all basically got one but the Raiders, and Atlanta didn't need one.
And then above all that, the Minnesota Vikings at pick 11,
love it.
J.J. McCarthy, maybe they liked Penix more. I don't know, but they didn't trade up in the top 8 to draft Penix, and they didn't trade up in the top 8 to draft JJ McCarthy. I gotta say one of the big winners of the draft is probably the Minnesota Vikings, based on what their draft board was, based on what they did not have to give up. They kept pick 23 and actually moved up from there. They kept their first round pick next year and got the guy that everyone was projecting that they were going to spend 3 first round picks on. They spent a first and some change on drafting JJ McCarthy, moving up one spot to pick 10 with the Jets. So I've got to say that among all the teams in the NFL draft, and look, we'll find out how good these players are, but based on draft boards and what you could have expected going into the night, I think the Minnesota Vikings drafting JJ McCarthy after a minor trade up to pick number 10 and then coming back up from 23 to draft Dallas Turner, what was probably, I would guess, the best defensive player on their board. So they got a franchise quarterback,
the top couple,
he thought is the best defensive player in the draft at pick 17 after moving up. So they've got to feel like they had a home run night, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And I don't know if McCarthy will work out at all. I have some questions about him, but I always say this: landing spot to me is as important as who the actual player is, and that is a tremendous landing spot. And you said it really well. They might have gotten their favorite defensive player for a team that needed front help on defense without question. They blitz a ton. They can blitz maybe a little less now. McCarthy's got 2 tackles. He's got great receivers, a perfect coach for him to groom. And all in all, they weren't harmed that bad in the future or other picks. They got their 2 targets.
There's so many things we're going to always remember about the 2020 NFL draft. And I think that's what's fun about a night like that is like, man, do you remember when 6 quarterbacks went in the top 12 that one year? Do you remember when there were no defensive players drafted until the 15th selection when the Colts drafted Byron Murphy out of the University of Texas with that selection? And it's going to come up in trivia questions. It's going to come up in 15 years when someone says, oh man, no defensive players have been taken yet. And it's been 7 picks. And they're going to, obviously bring up, oh yeah, remember the record was 2024 when no defensive players at all were taken until the 15th selection. Byron Murphy, by the way, went 16 to the Seahawks.
Right, it was late too, yeah.
The Colts went with the first defensive player. There was 3 in a row defensive players, all defensive linemen. Leatu Latu out of UCLA, the edge rusher, went to the Colts at pick 15 to start the run on defensive players in this draft. So, this is 2024 is going to be a trivia question season for multiple reasons, and none more so than the quarterbacks going early and no defensive players going early.
I mean, the Colts are a perfect example. They drafted their quarterback last year. They're striving to be a playoff team, and they get their choice of any defensive player. Like if you gave their GM True Serum yesterday at this time and said, you could have any defensive player on the board without moving, you think that's possible? He'd be like, and no, that's not possible. Right.
That's not possible, but it would be pretty cool. And guess what?
Yeah, we'll take advantage of it
for the Colts. Next, Matt, the top 1, top 2, top 3, top 4 defensive players were not cornerbacks either. Right. Not only did defensive players slide, defensive backs slid even more. So let's talk about the defensive backs, talk a little bit more about some of the fits, what we loved, some of the winners, and maybe, maybe something we didn't like as much, some losers from the first round of the 2024 NFL draft next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And when we're talking about professionals, LinkedIn isn't just some job board. LinkedIn helps you hire those you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role, your role. In a given month, only over 70% of LinkedIn users don't use any other job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL and join over 2.5 million small businesses that use LinkedIn for hiring. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode of your favorite Locked On podcast is brought to you by the best meal kit service in the game, Home Chef. No more having to answer the dreaded question, what are we going to do for dinner tonight? Thanks to Home Chef and their chef design recipes that are delivered directly to my door, all pre-packaged, pre-portioned. They even peel the garlic cloves for you. And each recipe, one of my favorites, blackened mahi, comes with a full page of easy to read instructions that include customization options and pictures to guide you along the way through the step-by-step process so you don't have to ask, is that what chard looks like? I cannot recommend Home Chef enough, especially right now, because for a limited time, Home Chef is giving Locked On listeners 18 free meals, free dessert for life, and of course, free shipping on your first box if you head to homechef.com/lockedon today. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. Yes, you heard that right. Homechef.com/lockedon. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
Obviously, Matt, there's a ton of offensive linemen drafted here. Yeah. And by the way, more on the quarterbacks, because I think that's going to pop up in our winners and losers a little bit later in this podcast. But looking at the offensive lineman, huge run on offensive lineman kind of throughout the round, and then it did slow down towards the end. And I think Tyler Guyton was sort of that last guy that snuck in as a tackle that teams liked to the Dallas Cowboys after they moved down, drafting the Oklahoma tackle at pick 29. So that was the final offensive lineman, final offensive tackle taken in this first round. I mentioned how it started with Joe Alt at pick number 5, J.C. Latham, pick 7 to the Tennessee Titans. Then it was Olu Fashanu, who went number 11 to the Jets after they moved back one spot with the Minnesota Vikings. Then you had Talise Fuaga, who went to the New Orleans Saints at pick number 14. Following that, Amarius Mims at 18 to the Cincinnati Bengals. Your Steelers, Matt, going with Troy Fautanu out of Washington at pick number 20. Then a little break before one of the surprising picks of round 1 was at 25, the Green Bay Packers selecting Arizona, I think probably guard, maybe tackle. Jordan Morgan, he's got tackle feet. Does he have tackle length with his arms is probably the big question there. Smooth mover out of the University of Arizona going to the Packers at 29. Then you had Graham Barton listed as a center here, and I think he will be a center probably for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at pick 26. And then the aforementioned Tyler Guyton coming in at number 29 to the Dallas Cowboys. What do you think about the offensive linemen in this draft, where they went, how many of them, the fit, and can we swap Fuaga for Troy Fautanu? I feel like the fits should have been opposite for those two players, with, you know, the guy who played left tackle in college going to the New Orleans Saints, the guy who played right tackle in college going to the Pittsburgh Steelers at 20.
Right, and I think the Steelers would have jumped on either, to be honest with you. I think they were thrilled that it went the way it did. I can promise you that. I was down there.
Guard.
I'm not avoiding. Good.
Fautanu as a guard here, you know, that's not the team listing. That's just, you know, I'm just looking at the ESPN tracker. But is he are they going to flip him to right tackle? What's the plan there for Fautanu?
He is a tackle. I mean, Tomlin said that at the podium 3 times. We interviewed Omar Khan directly after they left the podium. He is a tackle. He is a tackle. You know, I don't know, between Dan Moore, Jones, and Fautanu, they have 3 left tackles. Jones played a lot of right last year. They'll figure it out. I don't think they know that answer 100% right now. So be it. They were thrilled he was there. Not avoiding your O-line question, but just to even make it broader, like, I don't have a hard time being critical of teams after round 1. I've done this for 20 some years, and there's picks I don't like in there. But this year, because of the quarterback situation, I'm having a real hard time picking nits with any pick in the draft that's not quarterback, to be honest with you. Like, my Steelers are super happy. I bet the Eagles are super happy. We got Quinion Mitchell with the 22nd pick. Are you crazy? The Jags are like, we traded down and got Brian Thomas. I didn't think that was possible. The Lions end up with Terry and Arnold. You know, like, I mean, I think all these teams truly outkick their coverage a little bit. Like you mentioned, Jordan Morgan, I could take or leave that pick. I don't know that it was great business for Carolina to move into 32 for Leggett. I mean, when they could have been sitting there fielding offers all night long with the first overall pick tonight. But again, I'm really picking nits.
I think just about every team in the draft, maybe save the Bills, who traded out twice. Maybe they didn't like what was on the board for them, or maybe they just liked the offers they were getting. 49ers, that a reach on most.
There's another shoe to drop on that one, and
right. Yeah, so it makes you really think that there's going to be something else coming maybe today before the 33rd pick is on the clock, which is those Buffalo Bills, who, by the way, are wide receiver needy, little wide receiver run at the end of the first round. Xavier,
a lot of good fantasy fits too, by the way.
I mean, but every team in the back half of the first round probably thought to themselves, at least one or two guys we did not expect to be here is here.
I 100% agree. I mean, he never would have showed his hand, but I mentioned Omar Khan sat down with us right after, and I frankly said, did you really think 6 quarterbacks are going to go in the top 12, let alone before you picked a 20? And I phrased it wrong because I said, were you shocked? And no GM should ever say I was shocked by anything.
Right.
But he kind of looked at me like, yeah, we were pretty happy about that. And so did every GM, I bet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No doubt. I would have to, on that note, we teased the cornerback stuff. There were no defensive backs selected until pick number 22. And there was mock drafts that had the Philadelphia Eagles trading up from 22 all the way to number 8 to draft Quinyon Mitchell. He fell into their lap as the top corner in this draft at pick number 22. I mean, just phenomenal. Yeah. And Howie Roseman,
Kool-Aid and DeJean are still out there.
Kool-Aid and DeJean didn't even get drafted at all. So either the league really hates defensive backs nowadays, or we
may have overrated this corner class a little. I mean, that's fair at this point with some hindsight, but still, you never get the first corner off the board in any draft at 22 to a playoff team.
And I know he went to Toledo, but Quinyon Mitchell's profile is ridiculous.
It's great.
He's big, long, strong. He had like 22 reps at the combine on top of running 4.33. It just doesn't happen. He's got length. He's got great tape. He was awesome in the Senior Bowl. He was awesome at the combine. I mean, he's checked every single box except for playing in the SEC, basically. And I don't know what there is not to like about Quinyon Mitchell. And for him to fall all the way to 22, I mean, obviously the Eagles had to be ecstatic there. And the Eagles come away, it feels like, as big winners in every draft. And they do for me in this one.
100%. And even take it a step further, the second corner off the board, 2 picks later, Terry and Arnold, the Lions trade up. Good work, Detroit, by the way. You signed Sewell, you signed St. Brown, and then you host this awesome party with 250,000 people at it, and it's a blast. And then you come up and move up and get a guy that none of us would have thought was a Lion.
Right. And in a great fit, need meets value. You go up a few spots and boom, you get yourself a starting cornerback, which was probably the number one thing on their list to be able to do, and probably got a player, again, they didn't expect that would be there for them, and we're able to go up and get them.
I think that's the theme of the good teams.
Yeah.
The playoff teams are like, boy, we outkicked our coverage.
Did the Buffalo Bills do themselves and the rest of the league a disservice by allowing the Kansas City Chiefs to move up and draft Xavier Worthy, Matt, at pick number 28 in this draft?
Well, I don't think it's a ringing endorsement for Rashee Rice's future. I know they're very different players, but Marquise Brown's a free agent after this year. Rice could be in hot water, to say the least. So I don't think that's a great situation. I don't think anybody's thrilled about it. I mean, I don't think Worthy's a great prospect. I don't think he's just a track star. I like him a lot more than that. But he's going to influence the game a lot. And falling there doesn't mean I'm going to run out and put him on my fantasy team, but just sure makes the strongest team in the league not go backwards,
Absolutely. A couple more
fast. Let's talk Penix in a little more detail.
Oh, no. Yeah, we're going to finish on Penix because we haven't talked about losers yet. And I'm having a tough time wrapping my head around it. And they're in my loser category to tease that. And I need you to talk to me about how it's not, or it is the right move and a great move, because obviously there's reasons why it could be great. But I want to keep with some of the positives here real quick before we do go to the negative sides, and then take a little peek at day 2 of the draft as well. I like what the Arizona Cardinals did here. And they didn't do anything crazy. They just sat there and drafted players, one being Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 4. And, we kind of just glossed over the top of the draft because we kind of, expected these things to happen. And, you might get yourself a star wide receiver for a very long time for your young quarterback. So that's all good. But I really like Darius Robinson. And you look at a team that they have to knock off in the NFC West, there's nobody better at setting the edge as a defensive end in this class than Darius Robinson. So that's
good point.
I think a really nice fit, not only for where the player was. I think Darius Robinson was a late first round guy all day long, but you look at who they have to stop, and they need to set the edge against the 49ers, the Seahawks, the Rams a couple times a year. It's really important, and he's a really good fit for them to be able to do that. And a nice piece to be able to move around in Gannon's defense as well.
I keep bringing up fantasy, and I don't mean to, but like Marvin Harrison might go the second round of your fantasy draft on Labor Day weekend. That's awesome. And we don't have to spend much time at the top because we talk those guys to death. But I love what you said about Robinson setting the edge. And I think it's super important that people realize Arizona's defensive DNA is the Eagles. Like, I don't have to squint at all to see Darius Robinson in green in Philadelphia, part of an 8-man defensive line rotation. I mean, that's what Arizona strives to get to.
My last winner here is the most obvious, and that's the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, that's pretty nice.
I mean, how about that tandem? I thought someone was going to go up and get Rome Odunze, especially at pick 8. And again, that brings me back to pick 8. Did they not even get offers?
That's a thing. That's a whole nother segment. But weird things had to happen when they were on the clock at pick 8.
Yeah. But the Chicago Bears, you get your quarterback of the future, Caleb Williams. I mean, I don't know how he's going to turn out. I don't know how Rome Odunze, wide receiver out of Washington, is going to turn out with the 9th pick in the NFL draft. But if you're a Chicago Bears fan, you can dare to dream that you might have the best passing game you've ever had in your franchise's history. And that's got to be pretty exciting. So, you can't look at the Chicago Bears anything other than being big winners, even though we knew what one of those 2 picks was going to be coming in.
So I know the Penix conversations for next segment, but I feel like they fielded so many offers that the clock just ran out, and they're like, well, we'll just take the best guy that everybody wants, or what, you know what I mean? Like, well, I don't know. And then the Bears are like, oh, we'll take a Dunze. Thanks. Vikes are like, we'll just move up 1 for McCarthy. Thanks. I thought I was trying to get to 8, right.
Who are the losers? Who are the head scratchers in this draft?
Yeah,
and what's going to happen at the top of round 2 next? This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Monopoly Go. And I've been tracking the leaderboards on Monopoly every day. Haven't seen Williamson's name pop up yet. Keeping my eye out there on the scores, though, and putting my heart into it. Super pumped that I'm getting closer to the top. And obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. So you've probably already heard of it. It's a great mobile twist on classic Monopoly. You can explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in huge fortunes. You can charge rent on all the classic iconic properties in Monopoly. You can also charge your friends rent. You can heist from their vaults and collect money. You can also work with your friends to help open community chests and climb those leaderboards. And I love that they have leaderboards. They're keeping score on Monopoly. You can find out who is the best. So go get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and Google Play. And look, we don't know. The NFL draft is such that, and I know fans will push back, like, you don't know what's going to happen. You can't say a team was a loser or a winner, and that is absolutely true. But if you said, okay, 32 teams were losers in the 2024 NFL first round, you'd be half right. You know what I mean? Like, the hit rate's not amazing in the NFL draft anyway. And so some of it is risk management, and it's like, just get a good player and you win, kind of. And so even if you reach, right? And I'll talk about a reach that I think happened later in this draft. But Michael Penix to the Atlanta Falcons at pick number 8. Take me through the thought process, because really there's only one outcome that works, and that's that Michael Penix is a star, but like 3 or 4 years from now, right?
So even the last couple of days, we heard what I thought was the most obvious smokescreen in history. Atlanta's really into Penix. Like, yeah, sure they are. I mean, that's an obvious trade out of 8 spot. You don't want to be the first team that takes a defensive player. But then they do it. And I kind of was blown away. And I started to really think, Godfather style, think as those around you think. And I thought, do they think Cousins isn't going to be ready for week 1? It never happens in the NFL, but I think it does in the NBA and other sports. Is this a draft and trade situation? Like,
so when
the Raiders calling him as we speak? I mean, could he be in Vegas tomorrow?
I went live right before that pick happened because I thought there might be some action at pick 7. I didn't want to be live streaming for, for 5 hours or anything. So I was like, yeah, the Niners don't pick until late. So I'm going to go on around, after an hour or so after the draft starts, see what the first picks are, then jump on. And the first thing I see on the tracker, and I wasn't watching the TV at that point, was Atlanta Falcons, Michael Penix. And I was like, that can't be right. It has to be wrong. I was making sure I was on the right website. And then I was like, okay, there must have been a trade up and they haven't fixed the logo yet.
But yeah, right.
The team that moved up and drafted it and I missed it. And no, it was the Atlanta Falcons. And then their GM goes to the podium after the pick and says, he might have to sit for 4 or 5 years. And I'm thinking, Michael Penix is 29 years old in 5 years.
That doesn't even bother me that much. But the fact that you're going to get nothing out of him for half a decade or 3 years or whatever.
Get better for a long time for your football team that needs to get better and start competing. And it's not so, and there was a big report like, oh, they didn't even give Kirk Cousins a heads up that they're about to draft a quarterback. I mean, I don't care about that. Kirk Cousins probably not mad because he's like, well, he's not going to beat me out anyway.
Right.
I'm here. While I'm here, I will be the better quarterback. That's what
I'd rather throw him a Dunze to throw to, but I get it. Okay,
he didn't get us better while I am playing. And it's probably the same thing that pissed off Aaron Rodgers a few years ago. Is probably the same thing that is going to tick off Kirk Cousins. Not that he's hurt that they drafted his position, because he's probably not worried about losing the job to a rookie quarterback.
Okay, so much here in that. First off, I am in the belief that if a team believes that this prospect is a franchise quarterback prospect, there's no bad time to take them. And I also believe that drafting a quarterback when you don't need a quarterback is good business, because there's only 12 franchise guys in the league. And I'm not even sure Kirk Cousins is one of them. You know what I mean? So if you think a prospect can be that guy, sort of in Mahomes or Jordan Love fashion, but that's not apples to apples. I'm going to go there too. I at least get it. I mean, that's a premium position. You could trade one or the other a year from now. I mean, it's Steve Young and Joe Montana is not a terrible thing to have. This is far from Steve Young and Joe Montana. Now, people equating it to the Packers, I think, are really far off, because first of all, this is a much higher premium pick than Jordan Love was. And people forget this, but when the Packers made that choice for Love, Rodgers was declining rapidly. I mean, he was falling off a cliff. I think he was getting a little bit disinterested, frankly. And they didn't just re-sign him to monster money, the guaranteed deal. I mean, they saw the writing on the wall that he's not going to be here forever. And then as soon as they did that, Rodgers turned back into an MVP. Great. We lit a fire under the best quarterback in the league, and it worked. I also don't think Atlanta's roster, when we previewed this draft, was so awful on defense that others did. I thought they'd go defense here, but I thought they'd trade out of the spot. But I also thought their defense made strides last year. I didn't think this team had massive gaping needs that they ignored, but I still don't understand it at all. I mean, again, are they working a deal with the Raiders right now? I mean, they could trade him straight up for Max Crosby. I'm just making stuff up. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And again, not a lot of margin for error. He's got to be a star QB, or it's just the weirdest pick ever. And you missed a huge opportunity to help your team, and you didn't even play the draft game well. Where, oh man, this quarterback fell to us at 25. We have to make the pick. You drafted him at number 8, the 5th quarterback, or the 4th quarterback actually off the board. And the 5th or 6th in a lot of people's rankings. Maybe you liked him most. But again, if you. And
it made me wonder if there was something going wrong in their war room. Like, there's too many phones ringing. We can't handle the logistics of it all. Like, I don't remember where they were on the clock when they turned it in. Was it right at the end, or was it right at the beginning?
Yeah.
I wonder if there was technical difficulties. Like, I'm not, we don't have enough people to answer the phones. We can't get back to everybody. Everybody wants Penix. Let's just take them and we'll flip them. I don't know. It's so weird.
And if you knew you liked a quarterback like Penix, there was such an obvious chance that you could have drafted him at pick 8. When you signed Kirk Cousins, spend $40 million on your defense then. And just draft Penix and go with it.
Yeah.
Draft Penix and have signed
Christian Wilkins,
Garoppolo to be a stopgap for a couple of weeks or whatever. Like, bad example,
right?
But huge head scratcher. Very few ways it goes right, and the one way it goes right is he's a star quarterback for you in a couple of years, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody kills the Bears for trading up Trubisky. Nobody kills the Chiefs for trading up for Mahomes. I mean, nobody cares what happens if he's awesome. Of course,
the only rule is better work. That's the
just better work, right?
I mean, because that's the thing when teams really go out on a limb and do something crazy, they might talk themselves into it over the course of a few months behind closed doors. But when it becomes public and it misses, that's jobs on the line. Fontenot, Morris, you're not going to have a job in 3 years if Penix isn't a good NFL quarterback. You know what I mean?
I mean, we talking about a Kirk Cousins trade a year from now?
And if your team's not winning because you're spending first-round picks, top 10 picks, not helping your team win now, maybe another team is another group is coaching and GMing a star Penix in 4 years because you didn't win because you didn't draft the defensive players to help you win now. So, a lot of ways you can go wrong. Only one way can go right for the Atlanta Falcons.
100%. I do think that the league, I'll at least say this, probably liked Penix more than you and I did, where he wasn't a Levis fringe 1-2. Maybe Nick's was, but he wasn't. He's going the first no matter what, and probably reasonably early.
Do you remember what I brought up about Washington Commanders and their alpha test, as some people are calling it? And they invited the quarterbacks to the facility, and they all didn't know they were going to be together, and they did the top golf trip.
Mm-hmm.
It was the top 3 picks in this draft, and Michael Penix.
Yeah, okay.
He was part of the group that they brought.
I mean, the league probably looks at him as a starter.
Yeah.
Okay. And I get that. I mean, there's a lot to like about him.
So, and I think that is clear. The league and at least one team and probably multiple teams liked Penix more than what the consensus draft board said.
Consensus still wouldn't shock me if he ends up in Vegas in 2 hours.
One important things that needs to be said, and we're analyzing these things, and there's always I think teams know better than you do.
Yeah.
Consistently, there's some truth to that. Consistently, though, the consensus draft board outperforms NFL teams. So,
which is bonkers too.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of when you have a small group of people, they can talk themselves into weird stuff behind closed doors that when you put it out to a mass of people, you can kind of sometimes find closer to the answer. It doesn't mean it's always right. It just means that there's some flaws to some processes in some buildings.
100%. And sometimes it's just an owner saying, I say you take him, and we say, yes, sir. And everyone in the room goes, we shouldn't take him, but we're going to do it anyways. Real
quick. So the big theme we were talking about in the second round, so many teams with man, I can't believe player X is still on the board. Well, at the end of the round, I don't feel like that was the way with Ricky Pearsall. I do think that was a reach of a pick. Again, we're talking about a narrow margin of this really hitting as, dang, you got a first round wide receiver. I see him more of a role player, and a nice role is he has to be more than just a slot guy. And the Niners don't have high volume usage passing game for him to even be say the guy he's being compared to is Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Well, the Niners don't play that way to give him 100 catches a year, right? So that's a curious one for me, and I thought there was much better players on the board, and I kind of feel similar about Leggett in the very last pick. Is it worth moving up for a guy in Xavier Leggett? And the group of wide receivers they're putting together in Carolina is kind of weird. I guess it's somewhat complimentary, but I feel like you have to force. They're so one-dimensional. Jonathan Mingo, Xavier Leggett. You have to force the ball in one way to these receivers. I'm not sure if it's a cohesive group of we can just flow as an offense. So that worries me a little bit. And I don't know if he's worth necessarily moving up one spot for.
Yeah, and just for the 5th-year option that you probably won't use anyways. I mean, right.
Very few curious picks here, and most of it based on those early. I mean, again, Bo Nix to 12, it's a reach for me. It just is.
It is. I agree.
And so we'll see how these quarterbacks turn out. We know that some of them are probably going to be good, and we know that some of them historically are not going to be good. And that's the reality of where we're at right now, going into day 2. What do you see at the beginning of day 2, Matt?
I do think a veteran or two will get traded tonight. Very possibly a Niner receiver, even if it's just Jennings. I mean,
we got to be something, right? Ricky Pearsall 31. Something's
right.
afoot. Yeah.
No doubt. And because, I mean, they're not even a heavy 11 team, like they don't even play that many 3 receiver sets, and now they got 4. But I could see Debo moving, or Jennings, or somebody like that even. I don't know. I think these top guys are going to go really quick. The DeJeans, the Adonai Mitchells, Kool-Aid, Johnny Newton, McConkey, Rakestraw. I think they're going to fly off the board.
And yeah, but there's still wide receiver needy teams, wide receivers available. And if you say, why'd you draft Joe Alt? Well, you couldn't get a tackle that good, but you can still get a pretty good wide receiver if you're the Chargers here. Adonai Mitchell, maybe Ladd McConkey, whatever it is. You can find a receiver that can be a starting caliber guy right now on day 2. So that's why I like that strategy for the Chargers. Bills sitting there can get a wide receiver. The New England Patriots are talking trade potentially for a veteran wide receiver, or just might stick and pick at 34 and draft a receiver. So that might go quick. And then, the Johnny Newtons and the Kool-Aids, I think, will be off the board pretty quick here. And so there might be a lot of trades for teams up after stacking their board for day 2.
And last thing I have is I am just curious. I don't care strongly one way or another. When does the first safety, linebacker, running back, and second tight end actually go? Might be a while.
It might be a while, especially for running back, tight end. I think a linebacker run could start at least a couple of guys here in round 2. Safety. Do you consider Cooper Kupp a safe, or Cooper DeJean a safety is the question. And I think the resounding result is yes, teams do, which is why I wasn't selected last night.
I also think he could be one of the top 2 or 3 picks, just like Porter was last year,
It's going to be fun. I think there's going to be a lot of action early
I
in
do
round 2. And of course, Matt and I will be back after the weekend to break everything down from all of the final 6 rounds of the NFL draft. And I'm sure that those conversations are going to go well into the week next week. And we're going to break down every single team's draft here on Peacock and Williamson. It's the place you're going to want to be all off season long here every single day on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe. Back Monday right here, Peacock and Williamson.